And welcome again, everybody. Thanks for sharing in the chat box where you're from. We've got Japan, Egypt, Wisconsin, Oregon, DC, Texas. So welcome, everybody. And now I'd like to welcome Justin Harford, who's the moderator for this session. And we'll be welcoming you and introducing you to the panelists.
Great. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, everybody. My name is Justin Harford. I'm the project coordinator of the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange. Just trying to get my video started. Great. And I am happy to be here today speaking with our panelists. Today, the idea of this careers panel is for all of you to meet. We have about 3 interesting individuals here with disabilities working in different global careers, and we're hoping that you'll get a chance to get to know them a little bit better and kind of their careers and what they do. And also throughout the session, I think what we're planning on doing up front is closing up the chat while we're doing this discussion. However, in the last 20 or so minutes, we're gonna open the chat up again, and Monica's going to start taking your questions and comments and sharing those. So please be thinking about that as you're getting the chance to meet these panelists. So to start with, I think why don't we just get a chance to meet them? So I think what I want to do is I want to start with Irene Scott. And Irene, I want to ask you tell us about yourself, and that can include 1 or 2 interesting facts that summarize who you are as a person. It could be where you're from, your values, what makes you tick, just kind of just a couple little factoids that help us get a sense of kind of what makes you, what your interests are.
Sure, thank you, Justin. So hello, my name is Irene Scott. I'm a program manager at Texas A&M University, and I've been in the field of international education for approximately 13 years, and I love it. Initially, when I graduated from grad school and college personnel, I just wanted to work with students. And then I found my niche in education abroad and been there since then. Interesting facts about me that highlights my values is, as a child, I remember sometimes I'll ask my mom and we'll point out different people in public and say, hey, that person looks interesting. I wonder where they from, what are they about? And my mom would say, go up and ask them. And I would do that. And so I always had a curiosity for different cultures, people from different backgrounds, and I continue to carry that in my day-to-day work, especially when it comes to initiatives related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So.
That's a great story, Irene. Why don't we move on and direct the question to India Ochs. India, take the floor.
Good morning, everyone. I am India Ochs, and I'm a compliance officer with the United States Department of State. I also am a mom, human rights and disability rights advocate, strong proponent of balancing work life and wellness, and would be in my 36th year playing recreational soccer if not for the shutdown. Your opening question reminds me of when one of my professors in undergrad asked a similar question, asking if we could say who we are, or our identity, in one word, and the first thing that came to mind wasn't being from Annapolis, or Maryland, but simply, American. Because at the time I felt it defined both where I was physically from, along with my core beliefs of basic human rights, and how lucky I felt living in a country that let us question the very values we were founded on. I was also the freak kid obsessed with quotes, including by Will Rogers, an actor and comedian from the 1920s. That I am sure most younger people listening have no idea who I am talking about, but along with his many jokes about government or the early days of parking cars, I especially share in his assertion that we should live in such a way that you would not be ashamed to sell your parrot to the town gossip.
Nice. I like your comment about quotes. It reminds me a while back, a couple years ago, I downloaded, and if you go onto the App Store, you can find many apps that will give you a quote of the day. And I haven't used that for a while. I'm mostly just being too lazy to re-download it, but I learned a lot of really interesting stuff from that application. Monica, is Andani in the meeting yet?
I do not see him. If he is, if he can please chat me if his name is different in the box, but I do not see that he's here yet.
All right. Well, then I will direct this next question back to Irene Scott. And you sort of did this already, but why don't you just tell us about your work, a little bit more about your work, and you know, maybe another factoid that kind of got you interested in this career.
Yeah, sure. So I shared how I had been part of education abroad for a while with Texas A&M University. Initially, when I started, I was an advisor, and a lot of that entail is working with faculty leaders and supporting them in their program development for students. So whenever they create programs, there'll be different service levels, and responsibility can include, you know, marketing, recruiting, orientating the student, processing invoices, handling the logistics. And so I did that for a while. I love it. I was on the front line with the students. But then in the office, there was an opportunity to transition to focus on a different program model. And that entailed Texas A&M, like non-university sponsored programs, in which they can be possibly coordinated through a third-party provider, or they could be coordinated through another institution, but students can still get an rewarding experience, but it will be for transfer credit. And I enjoy it. There is so many great providers out there. Some of them, they do more than just experiences for study. You know, they do internship, research, volunteer. You'd be surprised. It's so like Burger King, have it your way. And, you know, so it's just great to give students more options. And then now there's a new trend of virtual experiences. With my current position now, I'm doing more leadership. And so you just think of all the policies and processes that might cause headache. And we collaborate with other people behind the scene across campuses to try to minimize and reduce barriers. So my day-to-day responsibility include just managing processes and agreement, creating resources related to different program types, training our staff and trying to give them the tools to do their job well, and also serving on different communities. So.
Thanks, Irene. That sounds great. India, what do you think? Why don't you tell us, how'd you get into your career, and let's see, and tell us about your work and what interested you.
In regards to work, my specific office monitors the J1 exchange visitor programs, which, at least before the shutdown, saw around 300,000 new foreign nationals coming in as exchange visitors every year, be it as students, teachers, professors, research scholars, interns, doctors, au pairs, or foreign college students coming here during their summer breaks to work seasonal jobs like lifeguards or at amusement parks. As a compliance officer, I basically do exactly what my job title says, ensuring that the sponsors who administer exchange visitor programs remain in compliance of federal regulations. Specifically, we conduct compliance reviews of exchange visitor program sponsors, which may or may not result in imposing sanctions on the sponsor. I know our exchange visitors and sponsors are usually focused on just having successful and enjoyable exchange programs, but one of the main goals for my office is to make sure exchange visitors' health, safety, and welfare is not put in danger, and our country's national security and foreign policy is not compromised. Turning back to logistics, Sometimes we narrow our compliance review to just a specific incident that occurred, while other times we review how a sponsor administers its whole exchange program. But regardless of the type of review, we always approach it in an objective and fair manner. Ideally, if we find something in violation of regulations, we want to support the sponsor in rehabilitating its program through lesser sanctions, like a corrective action plan. But if it looks like exchange visitors are, or potentially would be, put in danger, or if national security is being threatened, and we do not think the actions can be corrected, we do issue greater sanctions to suspend or end a sponsor's program, which is why no one wants to actually get a call from me. But I promise, we are not as scary as some might think.
Thank you, India. Kind of a follow-up question, if I may. Does this job, I guess, it sounds like these audits of providers, does this involve going to see them in person to do in-person audits, or how does that work?
Yes, usually it's a 3-day visit with a lot of questions and reviewing files on site. Then we analyze everything back at the office.
Nice. Okay. And I'm going to direct this next question back to Irene Scott. Have you ever studied abroad or had international experience before you got to where you're at? And how did that impact your career?
Yes, my first international experience was in high school to France and Spain. And we was there for 2 weeks, and it was coordinated by the language department of the school. So we focused a lot on immersions. Since that small dose, when I went to college at Bowling Green State University, I remember going through the first year, the first students, different orientation sessions, and I sat on one led by the German department, and I was like, you know what? I want to go abroad. I want to go as long as I can. And so, and she says, okay, well, work on your courses, and perhaps by your junior year, you'll be ready to do an academic year program in Salzburg, Austria. And so I work on that, and that happened. And by doing a longer immersions experience, it just opened my eyes to so much more. Definitely a broader perspective on things. Our classes was totally different. So, you know, when you're learning about the unification of the two Germanys, and you can actually go in the community and meet people who had relatives during that time and talk to them, and they'll share their different perspective. Or if you're in a geography class and they're talking about agriculture or something like that, and you can actually take a trip up in the mountains and meet a farmer who living their lives and doing different things and how they care for livestock and things. And so it's definitely, there's a lot of studies that support this of how international experiences is transformative and all the benefits. And definitely when you do take time to immerse yourself in the culture, you are going to gain increased flexibility, adaptability, confidence, self-awareness, learn all those great skills, problem solving, navigating cultural or communication barriers. And so all that had just helped me be a better advisor and resource to when we talk to students about available opportunities and well as preparing for them. Because, you know, it is a journey, and we all learn from each other's journeys.
Thanks, Irene. I actually had spent a year abroad as well, and definitely thought it was an amazing experience. It seems like now we see the majority of people that study abroad or doing it more short term. And I mean, do you ever try to like kind of encourage, or did you try to encourage when you're an advisor, your students to think longer term, or kind of how do you think about that comparison between long-term and short-term programs, and why would you have chosen a longer term one?
Yes, that's definitely one of the biggest push among international educators is you would love to see students do long-term programs. However, some of them do pick short-term programs for different reasons. So it's always good to have some sort of experience and none at all. But I know I can speak for our students and our culture is some students don't want to miss out on different traditions on campus, or they might have very rigorous academic programs where they only have availability during these small pockets of times. So definitely summer programs or winter break programs are popular. Or we have some students who are in a military science and they have rigorous training that also play on their time. So nonetheless, yes, academic year isn't ideal. You definitely get more return on your investment, but something better than nothing is good too.
That's true. And I think I've seen the studies show that like even short-term experiences increase curiosity and global engagement. And I got to have a couple short-term experiences when I was in high school, and they definitely inspired me to do some of the longer things. So that's a good point. I'm going to go ahead and direct the question to India. Tell us if you've ever studied abroad or had an international experience and how that may have impacted your career.
Somehow, my planned trips overseas during school got canceled due to wars. First by the first Gulf War in high school, and then by civil unrest in Zimbabwe while in law school. But luckily, prior to working at the State Department, I had the tremendous honor working as a human rights attorney with the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Human Rights, partnering with activists in over 20 countries around the world to develop legal and legislative projects, promoting things like the right to education, right to clean water, and the rule of law, while at the same time trying to combat child labor, political imprisonment, and slavery. And in all honesty, those experiences helped shape not only my career, but the rest of my life, as I see similarities in how certain demographics are treated in the United States, and can use what I saw worked and didn't work in other countries to strengthen how we approach things in the United States. I also will say even the opportunity to study 2 weeks at the Institute for Human Rights in Turku, Finland, when I was in my previous job as a human rights attorney, was a unique opportunity to interact with colleagues from around the world and participate in deeper conversations about how we each view certain human rights, depending on influences from different cultures and governments.
That's a great story, India, and it just goes to show that you don't have to necessarily study abroad in college in order to get global experience. And I guess we all end up having some of our international plans held up. I don't know if anybody in the audience had your plans held up by the pandemic. We'll just imagine having them held up by wars. Why don't we go ahead and direct this next question back to Irene Scott. Tell us, Irene, how does your disability impact or not impact your work? And also any sort of reasonable accommodations or tricks that you use to do your work.
So generally my day-to-day, I would say my disability does not impact too much of my work. However, there'll be situations that will pop up where I will advocate for certain strategies or certain tips. So I'll give you an example. In light of us transitioning to working virtually and doing more things online, my colleagues and I, we're adjusting to learning more about Zoom and its accessibility features. So now part of all of our meetings, we made sure we enable the CC live transcript. And it turned out even though it was something that, yes, I needed as an individual who's hard of hearing, is turned out to be beneficial to everyone because some of our colleagues was joining meetings on their phone, or they might have sketchy internet access, or they might not have a really good, reasonable mic. So it's like all these different sound and connection quality, but the live transcript really helped make sure people can follow along mostly, in addition to releasing the detailed minutes. During my time, like with my travels, I think one important strategy is it's just important to be upfront with what your needs are, and also try to meet people halfway of what is helpful for you. So that had helped me with my travel. So a lot of times when I prepare for a trip, you know, I share, hey, I do have these challenges in these situations, but this will be helpful. And then also just be flexible too, based on available resources, as long as it's meeting the end goal of you receiving the information that you need.
That makes a, yeah, those are all great tips. Thank you, Irene. And yeah, it's actually kind of a comment. You made a comment about your transcripts and captions, and we've actually found that, I mean, if you go to our websites, pretty much you can access a transcript of a good number of the webinars that we've done over the last couple years. You can download a transcript, and that's thanks to the fact that we provided speech-to-text services on those webinars, which now make it possible for pretty much everybody to go through and just quickly read through the conversation if you kind of are short on time or whatever. And why don't we move on to India? Tell us, how does your disability impact or not impact your work, and kind of any reasonable accommodations you use, or any sort of tips you have for other people with disabilities about getting accommodations at work?
More people will be I guess this will be a short answer because, like in other areas of my life, I have simply refused to let my speech disability impact my work. I am going to do what I do, regardless of what may appear to be traveling on roads with no outlets. The good news is, as inferred earlier, no one wants to hear from a compliance officer, ever, so luckily, before the pandemic, I did not get the number of calls as my sister offices do, and thus did not have to worry too much about things like how to keep the volume low enough on my iPad, so my colleagues in other tubes didn't hear my conversations. But as another example, even before the shutdown, I facilitated a lot of bi-weekly working groups, along with my bureau's work-life wellness committee, and there always were people calling in to the meetings, including myself at times, and my speech disability never limited my ability to successfully engage with people over the phone. That said, I will just quickly add there always will be questions at the back of my mind about whether my disability has been the reason not to get promoted to new positions, even though one also has to remember, the higher you move up, the harder it is anyway to get promoted, given more people will be vying for fewer positions at the next level.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, thanks for those reflections. I mean, I guess I can kind of share my disability. It basically impacts my ability to read screens and write text, because I also have issues with repetitive stress injuries, but I use accommodations like an ergonomic keyboard and drag and dictate in a screen reader program to interact and to complete my work assignments. And I have found, you know, even sometimes still there are certain things that aren't accessible, like MailChimp wasn't really the most accessible thing when I was assigned 4 years ago to do newsletters. And so I looked for ways to reallocate or reassign those duties that I wasn't able to do because of lack of compliance to other people and try to take up other things that were kind of more along what I could do, like doing more writing and things like that. But anyway, what I always do now when I go to a new job is write up a big long list of accommodations. I always just kind of think of it like just write up every single thing you think you might need, and then basically whatever your job can't provide, you can negotiate in other ways, like maybe paying for it yourself or getting support from vocational rehabilitation or something. It sounds like Andani has just come in to the meeting. Andani, we're talking about what your disability means for your work, maybe is a better way to phrase it, other than how it impacts your work, because that sounds kind of negative. But what does your disability mean for your work, if anything, and what kinds of accommodations do you use at work for your disability? And do you have any comment about that, Andani?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for
maybe kind of share about what you do too.
Yes. Yes. So I'm a professor at Texas A&M. Actually, I just graduated with my PhD. So I'm right now in between jobs. So right now I'm sort of a little unemployed. But for the past 6 years, I was a doctoral student and a professor at Texas A&M. And yes. For me in my work, I think a lot of as a person with a physical disability, one of the challenges, especially with my hand, is getting support with, typing and just doing work that require me to use the computer and things like that. So those are the kinds of accommodations that I generally ask for. So sometimes you can get someone to help you with that. In terms of preparing documents and preparing, so for instance, I just wrote a 200-page dissertation, and that's quite a lot of typing to do. So sometimes you need either someone to help you with that, or you need extra time. And sometimes, like other persons with disabilities, I can be very stubborn and try to do it all on my own, and sometimes it can get a little challenging.
Great, thanks, Andani. Yeah, it reminds me when I was a student and did a thesis project, but I had human readers help me. So it sounds like you kind of have had scribes help you to do your typing.
Yes.
So now I'm going to go ahead. Well, why don't you tell us too? So it sounds like a teacher, professor, Texas A&M University. Andani, have you ever studied abroad or had an international experience before? And how did that impact your career?
Yes, so I was a State Department exchange student when I was in high school. So I took part in the Youth Exchange and Study Program, the YES program, in 2006, 2007. And I was hosted in Washington, D.C. And I took part in the Mayusa experience in Eugene in 2006. And after that, I've volunteered for Mayusa. I've volunteered for AFS USA and AFS Ghana. And yes, I think that the international exchange experience has really helped me in many ways in terms of just opening my world to so many different opportunities that you can get, that oftentimes, because students with disabilities in our various countries are often siloed into our own place and things like that. When you take part in things like these exchange programs allow you to see that there's a lot more that you can do than just what you know or what you are used to in your home country. So because, for instance, the reason why I was able to, so I didn't do masters. Like after my undergraduate degree, I just applied directly for a PhD. And I think part of the reason why I had that, what do I say? I was able to do that with a lot of gusto was because I had spent some time in the US and I knew the education system here a little. And I had the confidence that, with the level of academic excellence that I had, that I could get into a PhD directly, even without a master's. So I think that one of the major things that international exchange does for students with disabilities is that it just expands your world to so much that you can do. Especially those of us coming from communities where disability is still seen as, a limiting factor, something that means that you can't do, certain things, and you are not allowed into certain professions and things like that. So for me, I think,
where are you from?
yeah, I'm from Ghana.
Ghana, okay.
West Africa. Yes, Ghana is a country in West Africa, about 30 million people. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Andani. And for everybody who maybe doesn't know, Youth Exchange and Study Program is an exchange program for students from high school students from considered predominantly Muslim countries to come and study a year in the United States at a high school. So I think Cindy would be blown away to see just how far the students in the 2006 cohort like you have come. It's amazing how things change. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to just kind of open up some of these questions to our three panelists, and maybe first, if you guys could share experiences where you've had the chance to be more globally engaged in your jobs. How about India? Do you maybe I could invite? Do you have an answer? Or we can also direct it to the audience. And I remind, in India, you can just start interrupting me if you do have an answer, and I'll just stop talking. But anybody who also wants to offer a comment from the audience, and Monica, I believe, will be able to monitor if you have any. If the audience also has any follow-up questions. Another question is, we've talked about strategies. I think what I should do actually is pass this question to all of our panelists, which is, what would you recommend for an aspiring global professional with a disability, considering your perspective as a person with a disability? What tips would you have for other organizations to recruit and sustain more people with disabilities in the field? So based on your experience in a global career as a PWD, what tips can you suggest for other organizations to recruit and sustain people with disabilities in the field? Let's go to Irene.
So the question had two parts. So for the first part, regarding tips for
organizations for recruiting and sustaining people with disabilities.
Okay, good. Okay, so tips for employers. One thing to keep in mind is just evaluating how you're recruiting, like where are you posting these jobs. So sometimes in order to have a diverse pool, you need to be intentional and pick job vacancy that mirrors additional people that you're trying to attract. So, for I feel we are mindful of, Mobility International or different diversity abroad, and in addition to other mainstream job vacancies. So that's one tip. The other thing is looking at your interview questions and seeing whether there are questions that will attract or yeah, will attract people who have maybe have diverse life experiences that can contribute to your organization. And then as far as retaining, the key thing is just being mindful of institutional culture. It's very easy where people can become comfortable with people who are like them. But it's good to create a culture that is welcome to new ideas, welcome to different approaches to things, because ultimately we can learn from each other and each other's life experiences enriching others. So those are some of the things for consideration.
Irene, you your job right now, you've kind of been at the forefront of some of these HR questions that you're talking about, right?
Yes, I have served on a few task forces that focus on needs. So there has been very interesting, even with a large institution organization, we do not have certain standards set of questions. So that was one of the recommendations that came out of
Standards for interview questions?
Yeah. So like, I mean, in some departments it's a little bit easier than others where they might have questions of like, hey, have you ever worked with diverse individuals? Or we might ask, hey, what do diversity mean to you? Or have you learned another, do you know another language? So it's, again, you have to always go back to what the job description is, like what are the core duties. But there are ways where you can make sure you include some question that link to attracting diverse individuals.
Great comments. So I was actually, it's really interesting. I was thinking to myself, I wonder if there was a time at Texas A&M where you had to sort of change a policy. You were talking about kind of initially some of the things that you that you think that employers should keep in mind, both for recruiting, having interview questions, and also for sustaining. And I was kind of curious if there was like a policy like that you found you had to change in your position.
Yeah, I have been fortunate where I've been part of task force that make those decisions, or I've been asked to serve on hiring search committees, and then we always are tweaking things for improvement. So, so those are ways of how it is. I mean, some changes do take time, and but it's just being, if you do hear those opportunities, be the first to volunteer and contribute things, or if you hear those opportunities and you're not part of the process, at least share resources to whoever's in on those conversations. So that was just one of the things that we did. We did look at our questions, we look at our screening, and just try to make sure, yes, there's yes, we want to make sure we're in compliance, but we also want to make sure we're intentional.
Perfect. Nice. How about, can I pass this question on to India? What do you think, India? Tips for employers, based on your experience, tips for employers to recruit and sustain more people with disabilities in the field?
What I would recommend for an aspiring global professional with a disability is the same thing I would recommend for anyone. If you are able to, go after what truly is in your heart, what makes you, you. I realize not everyone can do this for financial or family reasons, but if you love what you do for work, it doesn't feel like work. Don't let others set goals for you. You set your own goals, your own dreams, and then figure out how to navigate the real world to achieve those dreams. Since I truly believe no dream is impossible, no star is unreachable, and even if at the end of it all, you did not ultimately get everything you wanted, you still will have that peace in your heart that you did everything possible and never gave up on yourself. And for other organizations, I will share what I recently shared with the State Department. In that, I feel like I am saying what people always hear, but it's the truth that people with disabilities are some of the hardest working employees who put in more time and effort and devotion to getting the job done than anyone you meet. Yet at the same time, it is important to remember to drop any unconscious bias we might have, including those of us with disabilities too, and view colleagues with disabilities as the individuals they are, with the same strengths and flaws as any human being. Not to mention, just as we need to always listen to people of color when they talk about racist or discriminatory actions, we need to listen to individuals with disabilities, whether that disability is visible or invisible, and not gloss over or make light of their stories or experiences as well. Same goes for hiring practices. An individual with a disability would not apply for a position if they did not believe they were fully capable of fulfilling all of its duties, and thus should be afforded the same opportunities as their peers regardless of their disability. And I guess much like I talked about earlier, if we want society to change as a whole and how they view and interact with people with disabilities, organizations have to be part of that change by not setting the bar low in what is expected from people with disabilities, hiring and promoting people with disabilities, and including them in decision-making discussions, and just having that mindset that supporting people with disabilities, including any accommodations they may need, actually supports everyone involved with the organization, which leads to more success and collaboration between everyone.
Thanks, India. And you reminded me, actually, I didn't realize this question did have two parts, which I think I'm going to move it on to Andani, but I'm going to circle back to Irene because she didn't get to answer the first part. I'm actually interested to hear what she said about that. Andani, based on your perspective as a person with a disability and a global career, what can you recommend for other aspiring disabled global professionals, and also what can you recommend for employers that are looking to recruit and retain people with disabilities?
So personally, so I've, I just finished my PhD, so I'm applying for jobs all over the world, because with professorship, you can teach anywhere around the world. And one of the things I've noticed that I've been doing is that I don't really, until I get to a question that the employer has, or as to whether I have a disability or not, I tend not to really mention it. I just apply as any other person. And I like what India was saying. We have the same, when you talk of technical strength and weaknesses, as any other job hunter out there, job seekers out there. So I tend to just apply for the position. And then when I see that they ask specifically for whether you have a disability or not, I answer it honestly. So my advice to persons with disabilities who are job seekers is that I think sometimes, and I'm going back to what India said in terms of the kind of prejudices that we have sort of internalized ourselves, that society has about us. Yeah. Sometimes we internalize those prejudices. So you might be looking at this job and say, oh, well, maybe because I'm a person with disability, I might not be able to do it. And sometimes you allow that to stop you from going for things that you can actually do, like anyone else. So what I will say, and it's the same thing that I did, like when I was applying for my PhD, I didn't mention it in any of my application materials until I got to where they say, check, are you a person with disability or something? And then I check that. But other than that, I just apply for the position, knowing that I can do the job, if I get it. So that's basically what I will emphasize for persons with disabilities when you are looking, if you are looking for jobs around the world. Now, as to institutions and organizations, I think both Irene and India sort of touched on this a little bit, but I think the major advice for institutions is to not, like the institutional culture, like, and I'm going to use the emphasis that we have these days on racial discrimination or sex discrimination in institutions. The emphasis, the institutional culture on persons with disabilities has to be, it has to have the same level of emphasis that, the kind of prejudices that are so rampant among institutions against persons with disabilities must be, combated. Like the institution have to be like outright in their mission statement, in the way they will move around these issues. And sometimes it include certain things like, so for instance, like I know I just finished my PhD. Some people use 7 years to finish, 8 years to finish PhDs. But there sometimes it can be like, if you are a person with disability and you are asking for more time to finish, instead of looking at it as just an institutional framework, like your work is challenging, so you are trying to get some extra time to do the work in the best way that you can. A lot of institutions might see that, so it's because this person is a disabled person, then that person it means that that's why the person is asking for extra time, and that so they can use that as a way to justify prejudice against persons with disabilities, even though you have so many people within the say PhD realm who don't even finish. Like the last statistics I had was that like over 60% of PhDs, 50 to 60% of PhDs don't finish. And if you are a person with disability, you're asking for maybe 1 extra year to finish, and then people would now look at it and think that because you are a person, that's why you are asking for extra time. All of these things are part of the culture of prejudice that people have, institutions have. It's people who have those prejudices, and it's people who lead these kinds of institutions. So I think institutions have to, make available the time that persons with disabilities might need. For instance, I mentioned, I typed all my work on like a single hand. And part of the challenge is that like right now I feel very exhausted. But my department, where my graduate director was very understanding to give me extra time to finish my dissertation, instead of like there's no more funding and what have you. So the issue is simply institutions understanding some of the nuances, some of the needs of persons with disabilities over maybe an extra semester or an extra year might help someone who struggles with typing or to finish. Outside that, I don't think I really needed that so much support in that, because like I'm a little bit stubborn when it comes to these kinds of things. So I want to try and do everything on my own. And maybe I think that if I had asked for like a scribe early on, I might have finished earlier than I did. So I think that sometimes institutions might offer these things. You get what I'm saying? Like if institutions know some of their needs. So for instance, if you employ someone who has disabled limbs, like the person cannot type, maybe as an institution to support this person, you might offer these kinds of like services to people, so that they feel supported, they feel like they can like you know their needs, and you are working to help them do these things. But other than that, some institutions just leave you to your own devices, and you have to do whatever you want to do, and sometimes they might not really be good in terms of getting people interested and getting people feeling like they are really supported by these institutions in which they work.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of referring for the need to employers to provide support to people with disabilities. Like, I mean, it'd be nice if we were just it'd be nice if I could just say, the only difference is that I can't see, but in reality, I mean, I have a whole bunch of this. I mean, it leads to a whole host of other accommodations and things that I need to be done differently. And you're talking about too your experience with needing extra time on your dissertation and taking a little time longer to type. Let's see, Irene, do you have any? What do you think, Irene, about people with disabilities? Tips for an aspiring global professional with a disability looking to get their foot in the door, and maybe maybe having to convince an employer to consider, you know, taking a couple extra steps to employ them. I mean, what do you think about that as far as the weird tips for an aspiring global professional to get their foot in the door and advocate for themselves?
So when I think of my life, it's definitely been a journey. My hearing has gotten worse over time. So during my time with at Texas A&M, it was one level, and then it's gotten worse later on. But through it all, I learned a lot. So one thing when you're applying for a job, just focus on the core duties, what is required. And if you see yourself that you have the qualification, whether it's a certain required education or a certain required skill set, go for it. Then some interviews, some hiring committee might have certain levels in interview. So there might be one level in interview where they're just screening just to see whether you get fit. What you've said on paper, does it match what you're able to articulate in the interview? And then the second level is more going, at least for us, we get into the nitty gritty of, okay, these are specific job scenarios you're gonna get. Are you prepared, or how much training you might need? And each such committee is different. You know, some of them might hire like, hey, you know what? We can train them. Yeah, we just want to make sure they have a good attitude or perspective, or they're teachable. And then there's others they might want to make sure everyone is meeting certain needs. So it just depends on the priority. So nonetheless, when you do are interviewing for different positions, don't take it personal. People have different priorities behind the scenes and different needs of how quickly they want someone to come in and hit the ground running. And so, you know, the right employer will say yes to you, and, you know, trust in that. The second thing is, when you do get hired, it is important to advocate what you need. So I know for me personally, when I was starting my first full-time job, I wrestle with like, oh, if I share this, you know, what the implications of this? What do they think of me? I mean, once you're hired, you know, they knew you had the capability to do what needs to be done, and you'd be surprised when you do ask for help. There are people who are there who are willing to work with you, and so that was a delight surprise, because you know, that had not always been the case. When you transition from being a student to being a professional, your network will change. So back in school days, you have individualized education plans. Your parents were probably in the office with the principal and the guidance counselor advocating on behalf of you. But then when you're a professional, you have to advocate yourself. Then your network is entails perhaps like a local rehabilitation agency. In Texas, we have something called Texas Workforce. Your network will also include the ASL Department of Human Resources, and they'll have their processes. And your network also include your immediate supervisor. So I say always, when you do share whatever you need, just always frame it in the sense of, hey, you know what, I'm invested in this, you're giving me an opportunity to do this, and these are some of the things specific that I need in order to be successful. And just go from there. And I know for me, my reasonable accommodation had changed over the years. So it went from, hey, make sure people are taking minutes, and then, so I can verify if I have missed something, to, oh, I do need someone to do captioning, or if you present with me, these are some tips that will help. And I've been very fortunate where my colleagues are always been accommodating. You know, they're like, hey, you're one of us. We're in this together. And other people have other needs. And so I'm definitely advocate. And then when you do advocate is, I know for me, I did do some research because yes, I was aware of, so like, okay, tier 1, ideal accommodation, and then here's a backup, just in case, because it will be a negotiation, depending on available resources.
Those are all great tips, Irene. Thanks for that. I think what we're going to do, we have about 15 minutes left. One of the things that I want to share about is we have, there's going to be an upcoming EDI Career Fair webinar. And also, so I just want to draw your attention to that. And also we have online career resources at www.myusa.org. EDDI is a partnership that we've established with international development organizations around the world, organizations including Save the Children, Madre, Chemonics, and all these organizations. One of the reasons why they partner with us is because they're looking for ways to recruit more employees with disabilities. And we actually have on one of our resources, you can find a list of our EDI partners, and to learn more about and you go to their websites and learn more about their job opportunities. And invite Monica to maybe chat that out in the box, those links. And also, Monica, could you, do you see any questions in the chat box?
Yeah, this is Monica. I have a question for all the panelists, actually. What one person was most instrumental in each panelist's life in encouraging or supporting your current position? I don't know if, Irene, do you want to start with that one, if there was a person?
Yeah, and it's easy. My mom. Yeah, my mother. So just a little bit about my family is my hearing disability and vision is genetic. So my mom is a person without disabilities, and so you know she tried to understand. She's like, okay, I sit through all these different talks and workshops to understand how to best support my baby. And one of the things she always had a philosophy is to focus on what you can do and find an expert to help you with whatever you're lacking. She said, hey, nothing wrong with your brain, you use that. And, you know, so she continues to be my sounding board through my journey, you know, with life and with my career. You know, something that India mentioned about, you know, the different levels as you're being promoted, you know, yeah, there can be a narrow challenges that you can see and how to navigate it. But my mom always been encouraging. She never gave me the option to quit. It just strategize, take a step back, strategize, and say, okay, well, we'll work with here. And it's also important to network along the way. But my mom had to been that stable driving force to just keep at it. So.
Great.
That's great.
India, was there anybody that was influential in your current position?
There wasn't really a person that I could name that supported or encouraged my current position, but I will say that when my son was 4 years old and filled out a sheet of paper about me at daycare, it motivated me when he wrote, "America, for my job."
That's great. I just want to ask India one more question from an audience member that kind of connects to that last response. Someone wants to know, let's see if I can have you visited internationally since you've been a mom from a fellow mom with a disability? As we know, many people's experiences and different priorities can shift how they're engaging with their current work too.
Actually, yes. I take my son to conferences for people with speech disabilities every 2 years, and so he has gone to Canada and Australia with me, and considers our conference friends his family.
That's great.
Does anyone else have any questions or
Yeah, I
comments?
mean,
Andani.
my mom has always been very supportive of my school. I remember when I had my accident, and we sat down, we had a conversation, and she was like, all your friends, they can go and do construction work. You can't do that. So you have to, you have to pay attention in school. That's your way out. And she's been very, very helpful. She used to go to the farm and work, and give me pocket, money for school. Um, so my mom has always been like my number one supporter. The other person that I can think of, like, instrumental in getting me here right now is, so when I finished my undergraduate studies, I was doing what we call in Ghana the National Service Program, and I was doing it at the English department at the University of Ghana. And I come from a relatively working class family, so we didn't have money. So to write program like exams like the GRE and others, I didn't have funds to do that. And one of my professors, Dr. Prince Adika, who I'd become friends with during my undergraduate studies, paid for them. Literally, without his support in me writing those programs, I most likely wouldn't have been here. So in recent times, Dr. Adika has been very, very helpful in getting me here. So I just wanted to mention him other than my mother.
Thanks, Andani. That's great. Yeah, I think I can share that even though I didn't end up being a history professor, I have known Kathy Kudlick, who is a visually impaired professor of French history since 2004. And I learned a lot from her in terms of better writing. I learned how to be a good writer from her, and kind of also learned how to about motivation. I think from her I got my interest in actually in international stuff. And she was the first person with a disability that I had met who'd studied abroad for a year and who had learned a couple different languages. And so I think that was kind of, she was kind of my template for sort of what I wanted my life to be in some way or not another. I've kind of found a different filling for the template, I guess, than being a history professor. But that was definitely somebody in my life who was impactful. Monica, are there any other questions?
We don't have any other questions from the audience, but I do have a question myself. Many times when we talk about tips for people with disabilities looking to get into an international career, we talk with people, youth, people who are still in high school, to people that maybe are looking to shift careers. that are later career professionals, and I'm interested to get any tips from all of you for someone who's just looking to explore it. Maybe they don't have that much experience studying abroad, but they're like really interested in a career in international field. Do you have any tips on people that are looking to get their feet wet into a career? What could they be doing now if they're interested in getting into the field anytime soon? Irene, do you have any tips?
Yeah, sure. So a few things that come to mind is, one is it's good to be aware of the latest. So, subscribing to specific newsletters or reading specific publications. Also, there's opportunity to volunteer with different regional or national conferences related to the desired area that you're looking to do. So those are some things that are low cost that you can do. Everyone's looking for volunteers. So that's just one way to be in, one is to expand your network, other people, so they're aware of you, should there's other opportunity that arise. But then also it is a good learning and exposure for you as well.
Yeah,
Andani, there you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Irene said about subscribing to newsletters and things like that. I think I applied for a position at Mayu's Help, I think a couple months ago. And I think I got to know about that position because I'm subscribed to the Mayu's newsletter and I get notifications all the time. So, subscribing to different newsletters, it can clutter up your email a lot, but it also allows you a lot of opportunity to see, things that are coming up. So especially for those of us who have international experience, where you are part of different alumni groups. So you always need to subscribe to their, networks, subscribe to your school alumni networks, because school alumni also tend to share a lot of resources for jobs and other kinds of opportunities. And just, Google is like one of our, the best tools we have now. You just, whatever field you are working in, when you put in a query or a search on Google, you are going to get a lot of results on, sometimes there are different companies who are hiring, so they will be putting advertisements and stuff like that on. So if you search on Google, if you go on Indeed and higher ed jobs, LinkedIn, so you make sure you have a LinkedIn account, you have your ideas that areas that you want to study or interest in, or you want to study or work in, you have your interest in those searched out and stuff like that. So you, like, the basic idea is that put yourself out there, make sure you are subscribed to different institutions and things like that, so that when opportunities come, you are going to be among the first to see it. Because oftentimes these opportunities are not just for people with disabilities alone, it's for everybody. And with the job market being very harsh and hard, everyone is applying. You might be one of 1,000 people applying. So if you put in, an impressive and early application, you stand a chance.
Sorry, that's great. Those are all great tips. Oh, yes.
I reiterate, volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. I got my job as a human rights attorney because I volunteered at the organization when looking for other work, and then they wanted to keep me so much they created a position for me. And then that job was my way to get my current job, since otherwise I would not had any previous international experiences.
That's great. That's great. Actually, I guess I could probably share a little bit about this too, actually. In my previous job, I was working, I was not exactly in a global career. I was working though at a Center for Independent Living and doing sort of disability organizing and public policy work in a very rural area, about 12,000 people where I lived in Northern California. And I just started looking for ways to get involved with MyUSA actually and volunteering. Fortunately, they did throw me a couple of bones in terms of things to volunteer in, and I made sure not to say no to any of them. That was kind of how I ended up getting tipped off about my job. So the other thing too I would add, in addition to these excellent tips that you've heard so far, is just to kind of think about reading, just look at reading articles and books. If you're trying to just like learn about a career field, there's a lot of really great books there about, like for example, I think there's a book called Career Diplomacy that's about foreign service careers. And for example, there's a book called Working World, Careers in International Education, Exchange and Development, and the author is Sherry Mueller. So that's an example of a book that talks about careers in international education and development. And I actually read that book earlier, and it has a lot of actually not only great sort of tips on how to, on some of the questions we've been discussing here, transitioning into a global career, but also it offers a number of those excellent resources, like Association of International Educators Forum on International Educational Exchange, where you can get a list of all the organizations out there that are involved in the career that interests you. You can go to their websites, subscribe to their newsletters, and like our panelists said, like Irene pointed out, go and try to volunteer with them. And like India also mentioned too, go try to volunteer with them and get involved so that you can get your foot in the door. And with that, it is 2 minutes past our ending time. So I think it's best that we end now. I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists, India Ochs, Irene Scott, and Andani. How do you pronounce your last name? Really apologize. Hello?
I think he's
Uh,
there.
yeah, it's Kholinar.
Kholinar and Andani Kholinar. Thank you, everybody. And thanks to Monica for technical support, and our MyUSA staff who's been very quiet. Monica,
Justin,
do you have any
yeah.
closing comments?
Yeah, I just want to let people know that we have the next session 5 coming up at 1:30 Eastern Time, Disability and Intersectionality, a conversation with International Exchange alumni with disabilities. So I hope you will all join us at that time too.
Excellent. Thank you. We will all see you then. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope to see you soon, and have a great rest of the symposium and a great week.
Great. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure talking with all of you.
You too, India.